I'd now like to call on another leader from Congress who has been very active in the fight against the opioid crisis, Congressman Dave Joyce. Congressman Joyce is the Republican Vice Chair of the Congressional Addiction, Treatment, and Recovery Caucus. Welcome, Congressman.
Hey, Congressman. How are you? Thanks for joining us. So, Congressman, we usually like to start to say, how have you seen this issue evolve, and how has it affected the people in your districts, like real stories? This is not just a bunch of Washington acronyms here.
Well, before I got to Congress, for 25 years, I was a prosecuting attorney. And, it's one of those things that when I first started practicing in the 80s, you heard a little bit about heroin. And then all of a sudden, just as in, say, 2009, 10, it started to come back, opioids and the heroin epidemic in a rage. And, I tried one case that was a pretty big case at home. And as a matter of fact, a wife who killed her husband, who was the doctor, who was supposedly the pill mill. And the young lady I tried it with, good young lawyer, and come to find out after I've gotten here that even she succumbed to the pain medication and then heroin. And you watch, she had little kids, and it just breaks your heart. I mean, and it's example after example. But one of the things that really hit home, I'm in a bipartisan group of former prosecutors or recovering prosecutors on the Hill, and one of the first times that we sat down, like, where can we have the biggest impact? What can we get the biggest bang for our buck being here doing? And while we initially thought, at the beginning of the discussion, it was going to be something on sentencing reform, as you went around the table, now these are people from all throughout the country, all of us talked about the issues that we were facing at home and how bad it's gotten over our time. So since then, we've used that effort to continue to try to figure out where we can be of help and where we can help our people back home try to put their arms around this, because Lord knows it's a tetra-headed monster.
Is this problem getting better or worse? And if it's not getting better, when do you think we can turn the corner?
Wow. I have not seen a downslide in this. I've only seen it getting worse, which is really the scary part. But we're making some good steps throughout trying to figure out what works. That's the biggest thing I ask whenever I go home and I go around to the different offices or agencies. What's working? What's helping? And certainly the recovery program and getting people back, having the ability when the person comes to you to say, okay, we'll help you, is important, because you can't tell them 72 hours or 3 weeks or a month, because they could be dead by that time. And secondly, I think it's very important that once we do have a chance to get them into treatment, that they come back to some type of stability, because they can't go right back to where they came from, because they're going to get back in the same trap. So it's important that we continue to coach, however long that is, and bring people forward and give them the ability to find employment and do the things that are necessary so they can get stability back in their life and get back on firm footing. One of the things I was surprised as I've argued for dollars, and I know this sounds very coarse, but I've heard it said, well, this is sort of like nature's way. Really? I mean, these are your kids? I'm sure everybody in this room can reach out and know somebody in a family or a friend whose family, somebody's been touched by this. My wife's family, a young kid, early on, overdosed of what he thought was heroin, but it was really fentanyl. And the craziness of all this, was that he was like the oldest one when all the kids are growing up, so all the kids sort of looked up to him. And, I saw it with my own kids. And in some ways, God bless, it was a shock for them. But, it's the leadership that they have. And unfortunately, when they go down that path, it's a leadership in the wrong direction. So we needed to work hard to make sure that people understand that this is an issue, and continue the education process, and then also try to help those who are in. But I go one step more. I think we need to declare war on it. Wherever the hell it's coming from, let's cut it at all sources. Because if it's not in the system, it's not accessible to people. And I know that sounds drastic, but you can't continue to say, well, there's a problem, and not cut off the source if we know where they're coming from. I believe that people are in pain, and that people need help during that pain period. And one of the things we've done in Ohio is that you don't get 60 or 90-day supplies. You come in and you'll get, if you have issues, then you might get a 10-day supply. And there's also then the screening that's taking place. You have to take a urinalysis, and then the doctor sits down and talks to you and make sure there's nothing else but pain medicine in your system. And
how new is that?
That's very recent.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing we need to coordinate is in Ohio, it's called ORS. I know in talking with Dr. Adams in Indiana, it's another name. But these are systems where pharmacies talk to each other. And so you can't go from Ohio into Indiana and buy or try to get your lost script refilled. And therefore, they know that you just got it filled 5 days earlier in Ohio. And so we have to get all these agencies to be able to talk to each other on the same platform so we can combat it over state lines. That's very important to get the pills out of the mix, at least.
We've talked a lot about this morning about the $6 billion over the next couple of years dealing with opioids. You're on the appropriations panel.
Yes.
What's the next step? How do you divvy out this money? What are the decisions? What are the timetables, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, the $6 billion is a start. And I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to take, but we have to at least have the conversation. So we've worked hard on that end of it. I submitted to our appropriations chairman a bipartisan letter of appropriators. Normally, appropriators don't send on the letters to appropriation committee because we're the committee. So I had said, well, everybody on the committee, let's sign a letter to the Chairman Freelandhausen to start to talk about how we can fund this and what can work and how we can get more money into the system. And again, find the things that work and rely on folks who are out there to tell us what's working and try to steer money to that. At home, there was one thing on TV called Luna Living. And I was working out one morning. I was talking about, well, if you're a professional, lawyer, doctor, those are the two that play in the commercial at different times, we'll get you cured in 2 weeks. So I immediately called Metro Health, the doctor there, and he said, well, we're working to see whether there's any science behind that. But if there's something that works in 2 weeks, God bless, we got to put some money behind that and make sure that we get that out into the communities. But wherever we're finding areas that we need help, we need to address and make sure we get the funding to make sure that happens.
How do you make sure, unfortunately, this issue now that it's getting a lot more funding in recent years has attracted a decent amount of fraud and abuse. Is that a federal issue, a state issue? Do you see that that's a problem in Ohio that has been addressed? And because that's got to be something that's got to be watched very carefully so that the funds are actually going toward people who should get it.
That's a great point. And I don't think a federal one-size-fits-all law works at all. I think it was something that we should get the financing and delegate it to the states because they have a much better ability on the state and county and local level to determine what's working and stay on top of it more than we can from here. But the one thing I will applaud our president for doing is finally declaring it an epidemic. The problem we need to do now is when you have a national emergency like that, like the hurricanes or the wildfires, we address it with money. How do we fix it? So I have sent a letter to the administration, another bipartisan letter saying, we applaud these efforts. Now let's talk about how we're going to fund these efforts and make sure that we actually do what we're saying we're doing. We know it's a problem. Let's address the problem and take it on because we have to win this now. We can't continue to kick the can down the road on this issue.
Have you been satisfied with the efforts of the Trump administration? Former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, who has dealt with his own addiction, has called the commission a sham. Do you agree?
Well, at least they declared there's an issue, and worked on it. And I've sent a letter, again, another bipartisan letter to Kellyanne Conway, who is the point person for this, asking for the opportunity to sit down and let's work out an agenda. Let's work with the administration. And while, as the senator correctly pointed out, the president can make the statement. It's the Appropriations Committee in the House that's going to be the ones financing the program. But we want to get on the same page. And let's face it, the bully pulpit has the ability to send out a powerful message. I mean, a lot of people here are younger than me, so you probably won't remember the old Nancy Reagan days. But, I remember as a little kid seeing the egg hitting the frying pan. There was an effect. It was something, but there's the ability to really put this out on a national market. We can't continue down this road, and we need to get some money to law enforcement as well. But we also need to hold the pharmaceutical companies accountable. I had a case. It was really sad. The lady was stealing. It was a farm tech who was stealing from the pharmacy. So once we got onto her, we started, work the case through. She stole 85,000 Vicodins. Now, my undergrad major is accounting, so I'm like internal control guy. I'm like, This should send off bells and whistles. You didn't sell 85,000, you know? Well, when the thing comes down to the end, all of a sudden it just automatically orders refills, so we refill it. You didn't make any money on it. Where did these go? I mean, and come on, the pharmacies and the pharmaceutical companies have to be held accountable for this as well. We're all in this together. We're not going to get out of it one by one. We have to work as a team, as Team USA, to beat this problem once and for all.
There's a lot of finger pointing on this epidemic. Some are certainly, there's a lot of lawsuits too now. The pharmaceutical companies and pharmacies have been blamed. Obamacare has been blamed. Trump has been blamed. How can the healthcare groups work together? The groups here in town to deal with the issue, hospital groups, because as you said, everyone is affected by this.
The collaboration on, again, what's working. And you know, in the hospitals, I know that my wife is a nurse and works in ER. And so on Sunday afternoons, you'll get people who show up and they're in great pain. And when they're told they're not getting Vicodin, they walk out. So, you know, you have to hold the line on tough love, and then we're not giving out medication. Now, whoever created that smiley face system, you know, a little bit of pain, a lot of pain, they should be hung. Because, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. And some of that goes back to, you know, let's face it, if the person's not in pain, they're not going to complain, and they're not going to sue the doctor or the hospital, so it's easier to prescribe, and maybe that's what started this program, but we got to end it. And I don't deny that people are in pain, again. You know, and I'm also think that we need to look at other ways that we can cover this pain, or no matter what it is in the medical field, but start working with medical folks to get people out of highly addictive things and into things that concentrate and just take care of the pain.
You've crafted the Stop OD Act. It's got 50 co-sponsors and a very broad base of right and left, Democrats, Republicans. Can you describe a little bit about that bill and where you see it going?
Well, hopefully passed. But one of the things a couple things we tried to address. One was the immediacy of having Narcan available in police, in EMS, in fire units, and unfortunately schools, and throughout the community. You know, and might do that by creating a funding mechanism so when people are involved in a drug case, part of that fine goes towards a pool of funds that'll be used to help local agencies then purchase this Narcan and make it available to everyone. But more importantly, it's the education that we're hoping to get in trying to help in sort of a multi-pronged education about what the devil that's here. I mean, because this truly must be the devil itself, and the fact that helping in the recovery end of it. And lastly is to end the stigmatization. You know, and somebody who's finally recovers, you also want them to get in a position where they're going in for that job interview and they say, well, I've had an issue. Okay, you're not getting the job. That's wrong. I mean, those are probably your best employees, people who had an issue and are now coming out of it because, you know, they've been there. You don't have to worry about them, hopefully, not going back. And so, you know, it's similar to the mental health issues that we've been facing over the years. I mean, we have to drop the stigmatization. I always told my kids, there's only one person who came here with all the answers, and look what we did to him.
Have you seen that dramatically improve the stigma issue?
No, unfortunately. But that is part of this education process and something we have to continue to work through moving forward. That this is going to be, again, an all hands on deck. The educators have to get out the word. We have to use the bully pulpit. We have to use what funding we can craft effectively to try to stop it and then try to heal those who are already wounded and continue to move it forward as a country. We can't go on like this. I mean, if we lost this many people in a war in 1 year, you know, we saw what happened because we've already lost more people last year than we did the Vietnam War. And look at the protests that took place there. Well, it's time for Americans to stand up, and you can't say it's not in my backyard. It's in everyone's backyard.
Got a few minutes left, so we'll open it up for questions. Got one in the front here.
Sure. Morning, Congressman. My name is Nick Jeebus. I'm a media reporter with the Daily Caller. You talked about holding Big Pharma accountable. It seems like we're heading for a second epidemic, even with pills like Ambien, Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan. Have you and your colleagues talked about how we're going to address that after we've addressed the opioid crisis?
Yeah, it's a lot of issues on both ends of this deal. First we're starting off with this because it's the most critical one. But the one thing that I can't understand is how Big Pharma advertised on TV. And why people go in and tell docs what they need. You know, they claim they need money for research, then I see you wasting a hell of a lot of money on ads all the time. And, you know, you know what they are. You see them when you're working out during the day, watching TV. God bless you. And, you know, it's something that they need to be held accountable. They made a lot of money off this, and they know how much they were pushing out there. And the statistic in that one town in West Virginia is staggering. Whoever was delivering those drugs, they should be held accountable. I mean, I'm a, you know, law enforcement, I guess, you know, in my bones, but you know, to me, you give me a couple prosecutors and you give me a grand jury, we'll find people to be held accountable, because you cannot say you didn't know. You can't put that many drugs in one community and say you didn't know there was an issue there. That's outrageous.
Way in the back.
Stacy Bridges, Veterans Vision. I have two comments, actually. One comment would be, we've got 22 vets committing suicide every day and one soldier, and not to mention the mass amount of drugs that are being given to them, be it for pain or for antipsychotics. And as the gentleman said in the front, we're not tackling that, but at every suicide, homicide, and murder-suicide in America, meds have been at the scene of every crime. So while we're looking at the opioid epidemic, I think we're missing the bigger picture with these mass drugs being given to every man, woman, and child. As an advocate and as a widow, I've seen these drugs kill. My fiance died in 30 days from a 30-day free sample of Abilify the doctor gave him for stress. Now, we didn't find out later that this was actually a schizophrenic drug that is being off-labeled and given to men, women, and children for autism, for ADHD, for back pain, for PMS, for pregnancy discomfort. And people aren't being told that these are actually antipsychotic drugs, and they're being advertised on TV as well. And my question to you, sir, you said you're law and order. When will these drug companies be held accountable? Because they have kill rates higher than Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all the terrorist organizations around the world combined, including the drug cartels in Mexico. The drugs are coming from in here. They're coming from the doctor's offices, and we have to address that as well. What are you planning to do to protect the people from this carnage that's happening in every city across America?
Well, first off, I'm so sorry. First off, I'm so sorry for your loss. Secondly, and I'm not trying to cop out on you here, but I didn't necessarily have a program in mind when I came here talking about the other pharmaceuticals. I'm focused on, obviously, this one. I do understand and agree with your point about our veterans. And that is something that's just heartbreaking, 22 people a day. And you know, these men and women have put it all on the line for us, and they deserve better. And you know, there has to be something we can do. And again, I just don't remember ever as a kid having drugs advertised. And you know, you go to the doctor, and the doctor will tell you what you need. And you know, when people come in and are telling doctors that I need this, we've set the wrong tone for the whole discussion. Because, you know, people come in and tell doctor, I want Vicodin. Well, you know, you wouldn't even try Advil. Well, how do you know you got to go right to Vicodin? Because, well, that works. Well, how do you know it works? You know, there's an unfortunately, and doctors, you know, part of it goes back to the malpractice issue again, but that's why it takes everybody working together. You know, I want you to think about 4. Doctors go to medical school for 4 years. They do a residency for 4 years. They have 4 hours of training on pain addictions and pain medications. 4 hours. So it's time we need to go back to a system where we educate the doctors as to, you know, the patient isn't always right. We have to, patients learn that we're not always right either, and say, well, unfortunately, you know, find out what the medications you're giving me, and then do your own research on them as well. Because if there's a problem with it, you know, it's one of the things with these commercials when you hear about all the side effects, who the hell would take it? So I certainly, again, I think you bring up something that's obviously correct. And if I were the Attorney General, it would be certainly something I'd be looking into.
And they say there's side effects quite quickly.
Oh, yeah.
We've run out of time for this session. Please thank the Congressman, Congressman Joyce, and I hand it back to Johanna. Hey, thanks, Congressman. I appreciate it.